The Bonine Carriage house was built in 1850. It has a stone foundation, and it has, on the third floor is where freedom seekers would stay. They would be given their food, shelter, and clothing, and if they needed medical attention, the doctor was called in. It has a lot of fancy details that we'll be putting back on as restoration of the carriage house continues. Welcome to the carriage house. We have items in here to tell the story of the carriage house. This is a type of wagon that they would have used to transport freedom seekers from one station to the next. Come a little closer. The freedom seekers would climb into the back of the wagon. The conductor and station master would put boards on top, put bags of grain or straw on top of that, and put a tailgate down. The slave catchers would think that the wagon was fully loaded and not stop the wagon. The trip was 10 to 12 miles from station to station, and so you would have been riding in here for 1 to 2 hours and probably riding kind of cramped up a little bit. So it would have been dark in there, and if you heard noises, you probably thought, oh, this is us, we're going back to slavery. And so you had to be very quiet to keep moving. This is off of our rooftop, so when we get to restoring the carriage house, this will go back on the four corners of the carriage house. And over here you can see when the construction began, what the carriage house looked like. I think it was 2014. We had to start on the west corner of the carriage house because it started to go really quickly. And then in 2017, we had to direct our attentions to the doorway in the east side of the carriage house because it was starting to crumble from underneath it, and called in the construction, and they put two big beams that went from one side out the other side to hold the carriage house in place while they worked. And this is the type of sleigh that ladies would have been driving in the 1800s to go visit their friends or go do a little quick shopping. We believe that the sleigh was built at a sleigh company in Kalamazoo. It has a bear blanket that probably was tanned in Three Rivers. It would have been pulled by one horse. So you get one horse open sleigh. And this is our friend Butterscotch, who has visited us from Ohio. And if you're ready, we'll go upstairs and I'll show you some of the equipment that they would have used on the farm in the 1800s. Welcome to the second floor. We have things that they would hitch their horses to either pull a wagon or maybe the plow. We have pickaxes that they would use to chop up the ground. We have pitchforks for pitching hay. And these would go on what they call a collar for horses. The collar is normally goes right around their neck, and these would have been sticking out the top. Now we go, thank God for lawnmowers. We don't have to use this device anymore to chop down grass or use to harvest wheat. Okay, and hopefully we'll be able to open up the third floor, and we're going to make it look like where the freedom seekers would have been staying at.
Sorry this is so dark. We have copper pots, an old milk can, and it's very, we've done a lot of work, but we have more to do. Hopefully this year and next year.
We are structurally safe. The foundation has been repaired. Our roof has been redone, and knock on wood, it's a pretty safe structure to walk in and visit. So if you get the chance, we'll visit.
And these are the doors. There's 2 sets of doors, and this is what's called a ramp barn. So the 2 buildings in front will be moved or excavated, and we'll install an earthen, a dirt ramp with grass up to these second floor doors. And and so the horses would pull the buggies up to this floor and go back down, and the animals stayed in the first floor.
And I want to take you back out. I want to tell you the story. One of the most exciting anti-slavery events to happen in Michigan, the Kentucky Slave Raid downstairs. I'm going to tell you one of the most exciting anti-slavery events that happened in Michigan, the Kentucky Slave Raid of 1847. In the spring of 1847, 2 large groups escaped from their Kentucky plantation. The first group was 22 and included William Casey, his wife, and his daughter. The second group, 11, and it included Perry Sanford. They made their way to Young's Prairie in Cass County, Michigan. The Kentucky slave owners heard rumors that their slaves were staying and working on Quaker farms. They sent a spy, Mr. Carpenter. Mr. Carpenter pretended to be an abolitionist. I'll tell you what, those Quakers are real friendly. They invited me in their homes, they fed me, they even let me stay in their homes. Once I found out where the slaves were staying at, I drew a map and I sent it back to Kentucky. In August 1847, 13 slave catchers came into the area. They stopped us 2 miles south of Josiah Osborne's farm. They left their tobacco wagon there that they had brought to take their slaves back in. They broke up into smaller groups. One group went to the Osborne farm, where there was a family of 5 staying in a cabin close to the Osborne's house. The slave catchers broke in. The wife and the daughter escaped out the window. The father and 2 sons were shackled in bed. Josiah Osborne sent 2 messengers out to his neighbors, and his neighbors all came to the Osborne farm. The slave catchers had shackled the father and 2 sons together and was about to start heading south when they were surrounded by the abolitionists and Quakers. They went from the Osborne farm to the Odell mill. The Reverend Stevens and another group went to the East farm, where there was a woman and her baby staying in one of the cabins. She could hear them going from cabin to cabin, and she knew soon that they would be coming to her cabin. She escapes out the window. She runs, she hides in the woods. In her panic, she realizes that she left her baby on the bed. Reverend Stevens breaks into the cabin. Ah, the woman, she got away. But then he spots the baby on the bed. I know how to get her back. He picks the baby up. He takes the baby outside. He makes the baby cry. The mother, hearing her baby cry, she comes out of hiding and is captured. And they go to the Odell mill. On Zachariah Sugar's farm, William Casey, his wife, and his daughter are staying in the cabin. Mrs. Casey escapes out the window. William Casey puts up a fight. He picks up a 3-legged stool. He strikes one of the slave owners in the head. The slave owner would die later on returning home to Kentucky. They overpower William Casey and capture him and his daughter. Mrs. Casey's running through the cornfield when her young master tries to capture her. But she's too much for him, and she licks him in the cornfield. And she makes her way to Zachariah Sugar's home. She alerts the family, and she goes back into hiding. On Henry Shepherd's farm, a man named Merriman is staying. Merriman had been sick ever since he arrived. And when the slave catchers break in, he tries to fight them, but they overpower him and capture him. On Stephen Bogue's farm, in a cabin, Joe Sanford, his wife, his daughter, Perry Sanford, and Joe Sanford and Rube Stevens are staying. At 4 o'clock in the morning, they hear a knock at the door. Joe Sanford goes, "Who's there?" The voice replies, "A friend." They all recognize the voice. It's the voice of Jack Graves, Joe's slave master. Jack Graves starts pounding on the door and he's yelling, "Joe, Joe, let me in." But Joe doesn't let him in. Joe starts yelling, "Murder, murder," hoping somebody would hear him and come to his aid. Jack Graves sticks his shotgun through the window. Joe picks up a hickory stick. He strikes Jack Graves with the hickory stick. Jack Graves drops his gun in the window. He leaves. Jack Graves and others return. They break into the cabin. They capture Joe, his wife, and his daughter. Bruce Stevens, who's up in the loft, he jumps down. He runs out the door. Perry Sanford, who's up in the loft as well, the cabin has a shake roof. He pushes the shakes aside, climbs out on the roof, jumps down on the ground. If you ever seen Lively running, that's what I was doing. I lost those slave catchers in the cornfield, and I made my way to Stephen Bogue's home. Mr. Bogue, the slave catchers broke into the cabin, and they took Joe and his family. Stephen Bogue gets on his horse, and he rides into Cassopolis. Hannibal secrets me upstairs, and I can look out the window, and I can see what's going on. Rube Stevens made it to William Jones's home. William Jones told the women that were there, "Women, go hide in the cellar." Told the men, "Go hide in the woods." He mounts his horse and he rides over to Stephen Bogue's home. The slave catchers are there. They have Bowie knives and pistols. William Jones, a Quaker, he doesn't have any weapons, but he tells them that he can shoot as fast as they can. And he stays there and he talks to them until Stephen Bogue and 30 others come from Cassopolis. And they go from Stephen Bogue's home to the Odell mill, where it's said that 100 to 300 people had gathered. The slave catchers had guns. Some of the crowd had guns. There was a fear that violence would soon erupt. Josiah Osborne and other lead Quakers spoke to the crowd and kept the situation calm. Josiah Osborne spoke to the slave catchers, and they agreed to go to Cassopolis to have their case settled in court. And they'll go from from Vandalia up to the Cassopolis courthouse. The Cass County Commissioner's out of town. The Marion County Commissioner's in town. Ebenezer McIlvaine. Here's the kicker. He's an abolitionist and a conductor on the Underground Railroad. For 3 days, he adjourns the case. On the third day, he left blacks testify against their slave owners, and then he turned to the slave owners and said, prove your case. We have the 1793 fugitive slave law that says we have the right to come into free states and take back our property. We have ownership papers that says these are our slaves. We have our state constitution that says Kentucky is a slave state. Overruled. McIlvaine overruled. He says, your state constitution isn't certified. He says the Kentucky's home empty-handed. The 9 freedom seekers are rushed over to Ishmael Lee's home, where Zachariah Sugar, he wears a big white hat. He's proud of his team of horses. He took those 40 freedom seekers from Cassopolis to Battle Creek, to Schoolcraft, to Dr. Nathan and Pamela Thomas's home. From there, he went to Battle Creek, to Erastus and Sarah Hussey's home. From there, they would travel on into Detroit, cross the Detroit River into Canada. Later on, the Kentuckians would try to sue in civil court in Detroit. The case was thrown out. The Kentuckians went home empty-handed, but the court cost was high. And for some, they sold their land and left the area. Around here, we say sometimes it costs a lot to do the right thing, but it's always right to do the right thing. In 1884, Perry Sanford told his story to the Sunday Morning Call, and that's the story of the Kentucky Raid of 1847. So now we're going to go and visit some of the sites that I talked about in the story.